Hello there, and welcome back to Dishonored 2. Once more we wake in the dreadful whale, although something feels different. Wait a minute, this isn't my tea, this is kombucha. Who put this hippie shit here? Megan, I am quite upset at the service you... Oh.
The void, but somehow different this time.
That explains things. Although I didn't realize the outsider was into that kind of drink.
Surprised I can pull you into this place? The outsider marked me long ago. I made you flee your precious tower and turned your father into cold stone. How difficult for you. But when I was young, sweet Jessamine and I were close as sisters, sharing a secret. Emperor Kaldwin had another daughter, born in shame to a kitchen maid.
Am I dreaming? If not, how is Delilah doing this?
But I want to come home like Jessamine.
I told you, when you're older, perhaps next year.
You said that last year. Jessamine's younger than me, and she's at court every day.
Jessamine is, well, it's complicated. You'll understand someday.
What did I do? I'll be good. I swear.
Next year, I promise.
Yeah, being born out of a wedlock in the Victorian era kind of sucked. And that's no less true for the Dishonored setting.
During the day, Jessamine and I played games in the tower. But at night, I'd go back to the servants' quarters to cockroaches and thin gruel. Emperor Daddy would visit and tell me if I was good. Next year, I'd be old enough to come to court to be a princess. Then one day, pretty Jessamine broke something worth a fortune, and the spy master caught us. She claimed I did it, and he whipped me in the garden house until I bled. My mother lost her kitchen job, and that night we were out on the streets with no place to sleep.
I didn't break it.
Would you like to tell me who did?
We were just playing.
Young lady Jessamine, who is your account?
It was her. Delilah's lie. She broke it.
Of course, as sympathetic as this makes Delilah, we do have to keep in mind that we're receiving this information from her. So we do have to take it with a few grains of salt.
Mother and I saw the nastiest parts of Dunwall, ending up in debtor's prison. Jessamine died quick on an assassin's blade, but my mother lingered for weeks after a fat guard broke her jaw. They threw me out when she died. I looked up at the lights of Dunwall Tower and swore revenge. Washing bedsheets in a brothel, I painted on the side, until Anton Sokolov took me as a student. That's the polite word for it. I was crafty even before the outsider marked me, and survived the worst the Empire could offer. Now it's your turn.
My mother's sick. She needs help.
Your mother kicked off while you were out begging. She's another bag of bones now, girl.
What? No!
Her sentence is served and she'll be tossed out with the others. You can't stay here anymore.
Either way, it's clear she has lived a hard life.
It's hard to know whether my dear old aunt is telling the truth or not. When I was young, the Loyalist conspiracy that kidnapped me also took Anton Sokolov. They brought him to the pub where I was being held and locked him in a cage meant for dogs. And you know what? Sokolov laughed at them. He taught me lessons and told me funny stories. He seemed immortal. His mind shaped our age. That's changed. The old man I rescued doesn't talk much. He eats what we give him, groans in his sleep, coughs out blood. I thought he'd tell me the secret to defeating Delilah and saving the Empire. I'm not even sure he knows where he is.
So, a nice little plot dump from Delilah on her backstory, and then our usual mission cutscene at the start.
I'm with you, even in the void. If only I could do more.
Mother? That wasn't a dream, was it?
Am I to blame for Delilah's bitterness?
No. She's the one who orchestrated the coup.
Our decisions have weight. I feel my time drawing to an end. Soon.
Well, that was new. And yeah, Emily has it exactly right. Whatever reasons Delilah may have for doing what she is currently, it doesn't change the fact that she does need to be stopped. And our next task in order to most effectively accomplish that is to take out one of her subordinates, Brianna Ashworth. Oh, and hey, we have a nice little souvenir from our time at the Clockwork Mansion. Alright, well, that's enough freshening up. Let's go check in on the other residents of the Whale. Let's see how Hypatia's doing now.
For a man of his age, Sokolov's making better progress than I would have expected.
Boop.
Good to see you're still with us. Thank you for helping, Anton.
Sokolov's not the only one making a rapid recovery. I'll be good enough to leave soon. There's a lot to do. Of course, unless the Duke falls, he'll undo my best efforts here.
Then we'll have to make sure Duke Luca Abel doesn't overstay his welcome.
Karnaka's key leaders are flawed, for certain. After all this is settled with the Duke, and the time of the coup has passed, whichever ones are left standing could change things here. Consider that, as you come face to face with the Duke's remaining associates.
I appreciate your thoughts on the matter, Alexandria.
It's almost like the actions that we'll be taking will be affecting the ending of Kanaka. Hint hint. Let's see what the Hat has to say about her.
It's as if she's emerged from a long, black dream. Hypatia's mood improves. She looks forward to seeing patients again. Already, she's thinking about an old patient suffering from boanthropy. She wants to know how the woman is progressing.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad to see we've done some good in the world. Reduce the chaos, if you will.
Jindosh wanted me to help him with a rather complicated problem. It would have enabled him to make his clockwork soldiers at a fraction of the cost. Clever man.
Not clever enough. What's wrong with people like that?
A restless mind and an empty heart, perhaps. Jindosh would have snuffed me out as soon as he got bored. I appreciate what Emily did for me, freeing me from that place.
I searched for you, Anton. I would have found you.
I knew you'd try, Megan. They kept me going after they gave me to Jindosh.
Either way, you're back now. I'm glad.
Alright, that's enough dripping eaves.
Emily.
Ah, the Empress has risen. A peaceful sleep, I hope. Nothing like the pillows at Dunwall Tower, made of goose feathers.
Sit down when you want to talk.
Anton, when I brought you back, you could barely speak. But it's been 3 days.
They tortured him. His body is covered with bruises.
Delilah has the throne, and my father is missing. This is Anton Sokolov, the greatest mind in the Empire.
No, Emily. Megan is right. I can make electricity move from one side of the room to the other, but Delilah is beyond my understanding. When I came to Serkonos, I meant to leave everything behind. But when the assassination started, I couldn't ignore it. By the time Megan and I connected the murders to the Duke, it was too late. The Crown Killer came for me. It kept me alive from my knowledge, but I saw things. Jindosh often had a visitor, Brianna Ashworth.
She's the curator of the Royal Conservatory.
Yes, Ashworth is dangerous. As obsessed with the occult as Delilah. Apparently, she's working on a device called the Oraculum.
There's more to her than either of you know.
If Ashworth is one of Delilah's lieutenants, I need to eliminate her. Who knows what this device is capable of, or what she's up to.
You know, Emily, there's no need to beat around the bush. You can just say your father got stoned. Yes, I did have to make that joke.
One of the more elaborate structures in Karnaca, closed to the public. More of the Duke's questionable rulership.
It must be nice to have friends in high places. And if we were playing a more lethal Emily, those friends would soon be in even higher places. Or lower, given the actions they've been taking as of late.
I have trouble remembering my mother's face sometimes. But there might be some resemblance.
Painted from memory. While trying to learn more about what the Duke of Sarkonos was up to, I began hearing a name I hadn't heard in almost 2 decades. Delilah Copperspoon. We painted together for a time, but her obsession with the occult and the Caldwin family took her out of my circles.
I saw some of her paintings. Beautiful, but somehow sinister.
You knew Delilah? All this time traveling with you and you never mentioned that?
My past is none of your business. You don't own everything, Empress.
Another life, another life. Megan came to Karnaca to reinvent herself. Maybe I did as well, but the Duke of Sarkonos had other ideas.
Sokolov certainly has chilled out quite a bit in recent years. He certainly doesn't seem like the type to experiment on innocent civilians anymore. And yes, I'm going to keep bringing that up periodically, just because I find it so amusing how his characterization in this game contrasts with his characterization in Dishonored 1. And yes, I know that's kind of the point, that he's a changed man, but I still find it amusing. Like, when I played through Dishonored 1, I never expected Sokolov would end up a willing and steadfast ally in this game, but that's what the writers went for. You certainly can't call Arcane unoriginal. And hey, we're getting more of Anton Sokolov's journey to the Pandician continent. If you read any of the lore books, these are good ones. Pandicia as a place is interesting, and I hope we eventually get a Dishonored spin-off that takes place there. That would be less of a stealth game and more of an open-worldish survival game, I would think. And it would certainly be interesting. I would like to see Arcane handle that type of game, especially since they already kind of have done that with Prey. Oh, and this door here, it's the only one that we've never been able to get through in the Dreadful Whale here. And it's the only one with its porthole window blocked off. I wonder what that's about. Anyway, just taking care of these blood flies, which were absolutely not our fault at all. We were very careful not to touch the cage. Must have been Megan's doing. Alright, well, with a good deed for the day done, let's head up to the top of the deck. Gotta get going after our next target. Well, you know what, let's actually snoop in Megan's quarters first. See what juicy deets she's been jotting down. Seems she had a rough past. Not unusual in this setting, that's for sure. Oh, and if you're wondering, the choppiness of the video will stop as soon as we enter the mission proper.
We'll take the skiff. I don't want to bring the dreadful whale any closer than we have to. There is a small dock in Syria Gardens, close to the Conservatory. That's as far as I can take you. Ready to go?
Yes, let's go.
There will be a Grand Guard presence outside the Royal Conservatory. Inside, be prepared for anything. Ashworth runs with an eclectic crowd. They'll be the real danger.
Someday I'd like to know more about how you met Ashworth.
I know you would. Trust me. Ashworth is important to Delilah. Which brings up something else. You might be able to exploit the Abbey of the Everyman in removing Ashworth from play. Turns out the Vice Overseer in Karnaca has been watching Ashworth from a hidden outpost near the Royal Conservatory. Check it out first if you want more options. Remember, if she's still working with Delilah, Ashworth is a grave threat.
Thanks, Megan. See you soon.
As with many missions, we start at a dock, but we're not the only ones at this dock here.
Our furniture workshop.
How long do we have to wait?
As long as it takes. We'll be picking up balusters and spindles made of zirconium underwood.
I thought the old Duke Theodanis outlawed underwood export to protect the trees.
I can't keep track of all the decrees. My client's refurbishing her gazebo, adding an exotic southern touch.
I don't get it. When I went to Dungeon, I brought back a little for a short breeze, because it reminds me of good times. So what's the point of buying wood from a country you never visited?
Lady Shersha has money, so she gets the wood she wants.
Eat the rich. But yeah, these people are here doing some sort of smuggling. They don't really factor into anything significantly. The only reason we're bothering with them is for that paper there. Although you do want to watch out. If you raise their ire too much, they will attack you, so be careful. But yeah, the streets leading up to the Royal Conservatory are quite well guarded. Plenty of sentries about, several walls of light. It's not easy to get around. Thanks to our special powers, of course, we have a much easier time than the common thief. Still though, we do have to be quite careful not to get spotted. So let's take a little side alley. Although we're not the only one with the idea to use this side alley for nefarious purposes.
Today you get to meet Pirate Betty in person. Time to pay the price if you want to live.
Oh no, please! I have nothing! I'm just a poor maid!
I see you've heard the stories about Pirate Betty, about all the terrible things I've done to the fools who refuse to give up some trinket or a bag of coins.
Have mercy! Don't hurt me!
Should I start by cutting off your nose?
Anyone help me!
Or maybe I could sign my name across your forehead with a knife. Use you as a human billboard.
Help! Murderer!
All right, no one's coming. What a bunch of cowards. We'll try it again later.
Yeah, Pirate Betty put the appropriate amount of hamminess into her performance, but the victim, you definitely could do to take a few acting classes, that's all I'll say. Well, at least they were kind enough to leave us a useful bottle of ether up there, making taking all of them down quite an easy task. And with that, we are free to use this side alley. It is definitely worth taking them out because if you approach them, they will immediately go hostile. They're thieves after all, and they just so happen to be guarding the entranceway to this black market.
Why do you cover your face? What do you want? Oh, I'm sorry. Please, take a look around. Welcome to my shop. Say, an acquaintance of mine is supposed to be holed up in an office overlooking the Royal Conservatory. Check on them if you're headed that way. I'd check myself, but the streets are locked down. I'd make it worth your time.
I'll think about it.
See anything you like? What a pleasant surprise to
So,
see
being
you
a
again.
protagonist, we are of course going to aid him. And the rewards are certainly worth the extra expended effort. But first, let's make a purchase here. Not for supplies, but for this safe combination. It is of course more efficient to rob the black market and obtain it that way, as we'll be doing with the rune later. But the safe is far enough in that I find it better to just purchase it now. We don't want to rob the market until completing his task after all, then we won't get our reward. And having to backtrack back into the mission for that save afterward would be more effort than I feel like giving.
Please make it quick.
As for how we'll rob the black market, based off of where I pointed the camera, you should have something of an idea. If you're clueless though, don't worry, we'll get to that eventually. Just robbing these thieves of all their worth. Show them the punishment for their poor acting abilities, and let's just move on. We could continue out at street level, but with the high security, that is not the best idea. However, we do see that the Wall of Light's power line is running up to the top of this building. So we'll be able to deactivate it somewhere inside. It's always worth keeping an eye out for small details like that in this game. If you don't already know what to do, that's how you figure out what to do, in most cases. Or you could just, you know, keep up the objective markers and follow them, but come on, that's kind of boring. It's a lot more fun to play if you explore organically, and not making use of your player advantage like that. Something's gotta give, something's gotta give, something's gotta give.
Damn it, I need to pee.
So you may have noticed we are making excellent use of the domino ability here in this mission. We've been using it quite to our advantage throughout this playthrough, but this is really the point of the game where it really starts to come into its own, and if you're playing as Emily, you will certainly be feeling its absence if you haven't yet purchased it. This is when groups of guards start becoming more and more common, and where taking them out without one of them noticing you doing so becomes more difficult, so just being able to eliminate them all with one action becomes so invaluable. Needless to say, getting through this section, at least with thorough exploration, without making active use of powers is quite a difficult task, which is why I'm very thankful I decided not to do that for this Let's Play. I was initially considering that, making it a gimmick since I had never properly done that before, but I eventually decided it wouldn't be the best idea, and I'm kind of glad I didn't bite that challenge, because I think it might have been a little bit too much for me to properly chew. And swallow. Don't forget to swallow. Anyway, as Megan informed us earlier, the Overseers are also looking into the Conservatory, since, you know, they're kind of against the whole void magic thing. And we would do well to make use of their knowledge. Free map of the building, that'll come in handy. And an audiograph that we will be playing after we've looted everything else. Also, do be wary of this trap here. If you trip it, you'll find yourself unexpectedly having a date with a real firecracker of a personality. A grenade, it's a grenade. So we've picked up a few notes here, and a few of them were on the oracular order. I've not discussed it explicitly, but we have learned a bit about them from those lore books. They are another major part of the Abbey of the Everyman, an all-female order that is responsible for guiding the Abbey. and they've been having some rather strange visions as of late.
Curator of the Royal Conservatory. For a while, I believed Ashworth had some connection to the occult in Karnaca. Something is happening that I don't understand. The overseers are the forward face of the Abbey, but equally important are our sisters from the Oracular Order. To be direct, I suspect something is wrong within their sect. Subtle changes to the types of proclamations they've been making. Small but troubling deviations from tradition. But publicly saying anything along those lines.
The technical officer came by and said it was fine. He looked at the wall of light, then climbed up to check the window. All good.
Ashworth has infiltrated the Oracular
Yesterday,
Order.
the wind kicked up so hard I thought the windmill was gonna fall apart. The wall of light was flickering and sparking like crazy.
I've seen that too. But whale oil's expensive now, and the tanks run dry. The wind's unpredictable, but it's still better than a bunch of howlers running through the checkpoint and knifing us to death.
Yeah, I see your point.
Apologies for the overlapping conversations there. I probably could have timed that better. Anyway, though we could have disabled the wall of light that was back there, it being powered by an easily accessible windmill and all, that would kind of set the gods on edge, so much like we did before, let's take the side path. Unfortunately, while the Grand God might not be stalking about, other people are. More witches. And needless to say, we really don't want to get their attention. As you may already be aware if you saw the appendix to the previous mission, they can be fairly nasty in combat, and we'll be seeing more of that in the appendix for this mission as well. In fact, for my money, they are the most dangerous enemy type out of any of the games thus far. They're pretty much miniature U's, so if you give them even a chance to get going, you are going to pay dearly for it. So stealth is the best method for taking them out. And thus come into play our trusty friend, Sleep Dots. Yep, there's a very good reason why you're only ever limited to 5 at a time. If you could just use them willy-nilly, you'd never really have a reason to use any of your other items or abilities. They're just that good. Anyway, we've spent a little bit too long of a time at street level. I'm starting to feel a bit wary, like we might encounter some gods soon, so let's head up instead, for a bit of a better vantage point. Also, what is probably my favorite NPC conversation in the game.
Melinda, you look great. Enrico said to give you his regards.
That donkey-faced cretin can open his wrist for all I care. Did you bring me something? The silver cigarette case, like we agreed?
No, listen. I can't go on doing this, stealing for you. I'll lose my job.
Do you want to be a servant all your life? You're always talking about leaving Karnaca on a big white boat, never to come back. You spend your days polishing silver cutlery. Come with me, Beatrix. Let's leave.
Could we really get passage on a ship? What if they find us?
You know I'll protect you, just like when we were kids.
I'll think about it. I promise.
It's just so sweet. Considerably less so if you come here on a high chaos run. Which, if you're interested in checking that out, just watch the appendix, as I'll be showing that off there. Anyway, just taking them out so they're not wandering about being a nuisance to us. I would like to leave them unharmed, but it's not worth the risk. Let's cover our tracks and make it look like they had a drunken fracas here. They're going to be leaving soon anyway, it won't cause them too much harm. And yeah, as you may have noticed, we're at a bit of an intersection there. Close enough to 2 of the comm speakers that we get to hear Duca Abel's rantings twice. Not the most pleasant experience to be sure, but it's over now. So let's just pick up some useful items. Seems like some guards might have been playing a rather high stakes game there. At least if the pistols are any indication. Maybe they were just playing cards. Hopefully that is the case. No need for unnecessary violence in a world already filled with it. And speaking of violence, a rather vicious threat of that from the Howlers to whoever owns this bar. Apparently he's being rather stingy about paying the protection money. And you know what, that's enough to get him in my good graces. I'll leave him alone. Hopefully though he does pay that, I wouldn't like to see him come to harm. I feel like we've bonded in that brief second of interaction.
They probably ran off, you ask me. Must have had a thing for each other.
No, she went missing a day before he did. And someone found an officer's pistol in the gutter. I think something else happened. Maybe they went inside the conservatory.
Look, Karnaka's leaking people. We tell ourselves we're keeping it together, but everyone is afraid of what will happen when it really falls apart.
I mean, yeah, maybe the gods just left like those two up above were talking about. Or maybe something else happened to them. We may be finding information to that effect later on. Anyway, we could continue on with street level, but as we are wont to do, we're going to avoid that. Exploring up is not only safer, but it also gives us access to plenty of optional areas filled with all sorts of goodies. Although you do want to be careful in this one because there are a lot of traps. A lot of traps. Do I need to say this again? This place is booby-trapped up the wazoo. And if you trigger one, you're going to be stung with so many dang bolts, so do proceed carefully here. On the plus side, it does give you a few extra howling bolts to play around with if you like that sort of thing. Personally, I've never found them all that useful. Sending an enemy running away scared is kind of the exact opposite of what you want to do generally.
Look at you, making your way across this shuddering city. Brianna Ashworth would have been miserable as a member of high society, forced to wed some bloated banker. Her only moments of real freedom, getting drunk at fancy balls, and slipping away to couple with strangers. It would have ended in an unhappy marriage and a late-night plunge into an icy river. But just before Mother and Father married her off, so many years ago, she found Delilah instead. It was all highways and graveyards after that, never looking back. Vice Overseer Byrne is an ambitious man, but he believes in the Abbey's mission, protecting the good people of the Empire against the likes of us. You know he'd be happier deep down if this ended with Brianna Ashworth's head on a spike. Maybe yours as well.
Shocker of shockers, being a woman in a Victorian-style setting isn't exactly the best thing. But Brianna pulled herself up by her bootstraps. Her magical bootstraps. And we'll be coming along to take that all away. Aren't we a nice person? Actually, as we'll be seeing as we go along, she's not entirely undeserving of some punishment. But that's for later. For now, let's proceed by heading through this bloodfly-infested hellhole. Although I will say, with dark vision, it certainly does look cool.
Some of you have questioned the stricter mind taxes being levied by the Grand Circoning Guard. Let me answer all of his rousing and what? Disloyalty, sedition will not be tolerated. Look at Duncan Bale. He's a patriot. He's a patriot who won't stop the man who won't turn every bit of this land into shiny coins. I asked him to double the number of mine workers, and he did it. No question. He did it. No complaints. Karnaca needed miners, and he produced them there. Out of thin air. That's the Serkonan spirit. That's what we need.
Some might have called that a visual and oral cacophony, but I call it art. Pure, unadulterated art. And that's not just a one-off joke. The Duke actually is an artist, a painter of pretty great renown, as we'll be seeing in a later mission, but that doesn't really matter at the moment, so let's just continue exploring. And oh, what's this? I told you that safe combination will be coming in handy sooner rather than later, and I'm sure you can see why it would be a pain after heading all the way back to the black market to rob it, to head back to here once more to open up the safe, and that's why I always prefer to just pick that up. It's less efficient in terms of earnings, but it's so much more efficient in terms of time. And time is honestly a lot more valuable. And as you may have noticed if you were paying particularly close attention, I kind of forgot to pick up the painting that was in the corner there. I don't know how, but consistently I always manage to miss picking up a few paintings whenever I run through this game. And it's not always the same one. Sometimes it's that one, sometimes it's the one of the Vice Overseer that we saw in an earlier mission. Always there ends up being one or two paintings that, even though I know they're there, I somehow manage to pass over them. Don't ask me how, I just take obliviousness to a whole new level, I guess. Anyway, that's just another way that you can enter this infested building here. But we're not interested in heading backwards, we want to move on forward. And eventually I figure out exactly where that is.
The Royal Conservatory. What do those walls hide?
So, another wall of light to make our way past, as well as a guard station. That makes stealthing through this area even more tricky since we now have to deal with the sight of guards as well as a massive spotlight. So let's just ignore that entirely. God, Far Reach is such a useful ability. Couldn't have done that with Corvo's Blink. So this is the apartment that the shopkeeper's assistant was holed up in, and where he was planning on making his way into the conservatory from. He also has a map, if you haven't picked up one before, of the place. And you do want to pick up that note there, as that gives us the explicit instructions that the shopkeeper gave. And if you pick that up, you'll actually end up getting a bit of a better deal when you bring back what he was trying to filch. There's also quite a number of useful supplies, including a bottle of ether. Ooh. I initially had plans with this, which is why I'm lugging it around. But I'll just tell you right now, I never actually used this for anything too useful. I had ideas, but I didn't really bring them to fruition in any meaningful way. So just getting that cleared right away. Anyway, if you don't have Far Reach, you can make your way up to that apartment from the street level. And though we could make our way forward from street level as well, there are quite a few guards wandering about. You'll just have to trust me on that. You can see them wandering past if you peer out long enough, so let's approach from up on high as we've been doing all this time. Don't fix what ain't broken and all that. Plus, conveniently from the upper ledge here, there is a very useful path leading right over to the conservatory. A lot safer than heading through street level. I'm peering around here because I know there's one other guard in the vicinity who I was trying to find the exact location of. Sadly, I didn't have much luck. That may come into play later, by the way. So, most of the windows are well and shuttered up, but a few were neglectfully left open.
The Conservatory. I wanted to visit this place with Wyman.
After trying to make grave hounds for weeks, she gave up. You should have seen the twisted things she made. All snouts and teeth and tails.
That's just the way it is, dear Parmelia. Delilah wears the outsider's mark, and some of what she can do flows down to us.
It doesn't seem fair.
Think about working your fingers raw, weaving nets, or raising cows to slaughter. Any of the gifts we receive is better than living under the boot.
That's true and fine. A wise way to look at things. But it won't help Lucinda rise any higher in Delilah's favor.
Did somebody say lesbian witch coven? I think somebody said lesbian witch coven. Anyway, I figured this would be a good place to use that bottle of ether, but as it turns out, not quite correct there. The witches are quick enough to react and teleport away that the cloud of ether doesn't really work to your advantage. Worth keeping in mind if you're playing through yourself. I never actually tried that out before, so I was more than a little bit disappointed. Especially since I had to end up wasting one of my sleep dots, but alas. Well, I entered the situation with the exact same number of bottles and ether in hand, so it's ultimately a rub. So, I mentioned before that we would see exactly why Brianna Ashworth and her witches aren't quite as pitiable as you might think. And this room right here is a very good example. They are quite naughty girls, kidnapping all sorts of innocent civilians and Grand Guardsmen and doing not terribly nice things to them, to put it mildly. Anyway, now that we have 3 runes, it's time to pick up bone charm crafting. So this has been an option in the menu that I've just been completely ignoring, mostly because we weren't able to make too much good use of it until recently. So essentially how bone charm crafting works in this game. To craft bone charms you need a certain amount of raw whalebone. This can be picked up from individual pieces within the missions or by breaking down bone charms or runes. Additionally, breaking down regular bone charms gives you the attribute that was possessed by that bone charm. The ones that are listed there, like Lucky Needle, Spirited, etc. And then with that whalebone and the traits that you've received from breaking down regular bone charms, you can craft your own custom bone charms. These can have up to 4 attributes, and if you pick up the other ability that we did in the bone charm crafting tree, it can be 4 of the same attribute, multiplying the effect. This is how you get bone charms that are actually worth a damn. Stacking 4 of the same ability actually makes the effects quite potent, however, it's not without risk. The more abilities you try and cram into a single bone charm, the higher the chance of corruption, adding a negative attribute along with your positive one. Basically the same thing as the corrupted bone charms we've picked up a few of in previous missions, although those ones in particular are unique and have special bonuses that we can't get with our own crafted bone charms. Ostensibly, there's a risk and reward system going on here. The more positive abilities you try and cram into a bone charm to get more benefit, the higher the risk of incurring a negative attribute that may undo all of that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, you can circumvent that entirely because the system wasn't designed as intelligently as it probably should have been. See, you can break down those custom bone charms that you've made, and they only give you 1 less raw whalebone than you put into making it. So if you're willing to sit here for a while and just repeatedly craft the same bone charm over and over, you can just wait until you either get no negative attribute, or one that doesn't really affect you, as we've just done here. You can also make use of saves to make this even easier, assuming you're playing on PC, which has quick load times. That's less tenable on console. But yeah, that is bone charm crafting in a nutshell, a system that had potential for being interesting, but just due to how it's designed is basically just a metagamey sort of thing. Like, you could try and go along with the whole, oh, I'll play with a powerful bone charm that has a negative attribute if that's what happens to happen. But it's so easy to game the system and get bone charms with no real negative effects that you'd be a fool not to do it. And that's probably the last time I'll bring up bone charm crafting. If I ever do it in the future on camera, I'll just skip it. So we could venture further inside the conservatory through the path that we took there. But I have another route in mind, so let's head back outside. Keeping an eye on where all of the guardsmen are, we don't want to be spotted after all, and hey, maybe I can make use of that ether after all. The second bottle, that is. Eventually. No, I just used the sleep dots? Really? It's been a while since I played through for this recording, so I don't quite remember everything that I did at the time. Oh yeah, that's right, I dropped the bottle of ether and then never go back for it. Yeah, sorry, if you were hoping to see cool shenanigans with ether, this is not the Let's Play for you. Anyway, that door there is locked, so we're gonna have to go— Ooh. Well, that's not great. Let's see if we can't get to somewhere where he won't spot us. Worst case scenario, we got the sleep dots. Yeah, don't ask me what happened there because I'm not entirely sure myself. If I had a guess, I would say what small glimpse of us that he did catch with that failed fire reach caused him to think we were over here on the street, rather than on our perch on the bush like we were. Either way it worked out, so I'm not exactly complaining, but this weird sort of AI fiddliness is exactly why I try and avoid being spotted, period. It's really hard to predict exactly what the gods are gonna do when they do think they've seen you. Anyway, we've come to the power source of the Wall of Light, and though we could disable it if we felt so inclined, that's not the best idea, as has been the case thus far. Don't want to attract undue attention, so let's take a less suspicious route inside. This is one of like 3 or 4 different routes that you can take to get inside quite stealthily, without even becoming close to becoming discovered. It's one of the things that I really do enjoy about this part of the mission. Even if there's no crazy gimmick like there was in the Clockwork Mansion, it's an excellently designed level, with just a whole bunch of different ways you can approach. Some better than others. It's a pick your poison sort of situation. Do you want to deal with guards going on the inside, the residents of the building, or the creatures that they've created? Despite looking rather threatening, those sorceress dogs really aren't all that bad, especially if you sneak up on them. Well, at least if you're a follower of the Outsider. If you're some random Joe, you're kinda screwed. That was the dude the shopkeep requested go in to retrieve the Roseboro collection, and it didn't exactly work out well for him. Coming over here, we come across another one of the entrances we could have used to get down into this basement area. It's only a little ways inside from the main entrance if that's how you choose to enter the building. Just for reference's sake. Of course, that probably doesn't mean much unless you've actually played through this mission yourself. That's one of the troubles I've been having, is figuring out exactly how to go through these missions in a way that makes their design make sense, and describing it in such a way as well. Because the levels are just so large, so complex, with so many different intercrossing, interconnecting pathways that if you're coming in blind, it can be real difficult actually getting a real physical sense of the place, as I know from experience.
The smell, the constant noise. At least they keep the curious away.
Our mistress likes them where they are, so you'll have to tolerate them.
Yes, but sometimes I want to smash them into a bloody pulp, just to enjoy the silence.
Is this a riddle? We're talking about the Grand Guard, right? Not the lovely bloodflies.
Of course. The bloodflies adore us. We should find more of the newly dead, so they can make new nests.
Then I agree. But dear Brianna wants us to wait until after the communion. Until she's finished with the oracular sisters. We can't risk raising suspicion now.
Then for now we'll wait, content with the nests we have.
That one witch has some awfully good dance moves, doesn't she? Oh, and also, we now have an inkling as to exactly what's causing the odd visions that the Oracular Order is seeing. It seems that Delilah and Ashworth are up to something. Something nefarious. Maybe we should try and do something about that. For now, though, Order number 1 is exterminating these pesky bloodflies. The witches may adore them, but I do not. We also get a further look at the witches' nastiness. Not just humans, but poor doggos are the victims as well. And that's a rather unfortunate pose to be slumped in. Oh, gotta love physics engines. Anyway, the key that we picked up in that boarded up room is what allowed us access to here. It's not the only instance of the key, but it's one of only a few.
Ashworth's journal might tell me more about why Delilah can't be killed.
After Delilah fell to the assassin Dowd, her magic was lost, and the coven scattered. I made a new life in Karnaca. Then I heard her whispering from the void, leading me to the Duke, who heard those same whispers. Together we worked to bring Delilah back into the world, changing the Empire from the home of Aramis Stilton 3 years ago. Across the Isles, all of us who'd been with her at Brigmore and before, we felt the magic return. Others joined, new faces, new blood. Now, Delilah is immortal, forever. She holds Dunwall, and we've turned to corrupting the Oracular Order. The Overseers take guidance from their prophetic sisters, and soon we'll influence their dreams and visions.
I guess I didn't need to cover that myself now, did I? I forgot how thoroughly Ashworth covered the matter. Ah well, better to be redundant than to not explain at all. Also, there's an archive key on the inside which doesn't actually help you because you can't obtain it without being able to enter in the first place. But it is a nice little setting detail that, at least when this place was in working order, they were safe enough to actually have an extra copy of the key inside. It's the small details like that I love about this game. As for the large details here, the main floor is rather well secured. Let's just say if we were to approach those glowing skulls, we'd have more troublesome doggos to deal with, so it's in our best interest to not take that pathway. Let's make use of the elevator then instead. Not activating it per se, that would be rather too conspicuous, but as we've gone over before, we have no trouble climbing up the thing. I wonder if this elevator design is actually based off of a real-world one, or if it's something that was made up entirely from whole cloth by the devs. Because it would be neat if they actually took a real-world design that made these climbable boxes actually make sense.
Looking at her old journals in the Forbidden Archives. She's going to be cross.
I only had a bit of a peek. Brianna was busy with something elaborate just before Delilah came to Karnak. I wanted to know.
Yeah, my apologies for not actually being close enough to those witches that are conversing to hear them loudly enough. I do try and show off all the conversations I can, but I'm not familiar of every instance of them. So there's going to be a few that are basically going to be no more than some subtitles flashing on the bottom of the screen.
It doesn't seem possible, that's all.
My dear Orlando.
It wasn't a hugely important conversation anyway, just about how Delilah came back, and how that was very much something they were not expecting. Now, this witch right here, you absolutely want to take her down because she is positioned perfectly to spot you if you try and muck about with that glowing nonsense over there, and more likely than not, you will be mucking about with it. If you don't take her out in advance, she will spot you and call all the witches down on you, as I have found myself the situation in with previous runs of this mission. So just showing a little bit of forethought there to avoid that unfortunate circumstance.
I'm told he's a gibbering idiot now.
I don't know, Delilah. Forgive me.
No, my dear. It's a loss. But I doubt he had anything more to give us.
Sokolov was taken away as well.
Who would want that ancient fool? Never mind. How goes the communion? I am hungry to whisper into the ears of the oracular sisters.
My influence grows. Last night, I walked through a dream with one of them, and we drank from a fountain in the town where she was born.
Vice Overseer Burns' suspicions were right.
Business with Jindosh won't affect things.
No. He continued to tinker with the lenses. Thicker, thinner, more opaque. It was tiresome to watch. I still have the old lenses and cast-off parts piled in my workshop, but Jindosh finished some time ago. The rest is up to me, learning to use the machine. A tricky thing, touching the void through such a device.
Blood and biscuits. I look forward to using it myself once you're ready.
Will you visit soon?
Perhaps. Dunwall Tower is mostly in hand. The High Overseer won't be a problem anymore. And there's the matter of my own project. I grow more excited to brushstroke. When I come to Karnaca, we'll drink an ocean of good wine and stay tight as a boiled owl.
I look forward to it.
For now, I need your eyes on the Duke. At least until we have the sisters under control.
You probably thought I was joking about the lesbian thing, but nope. It's a lesbian witch coven. And while exploring up here while Ashworth is still active, you do want to be careful. Always be crouching. Because she won't necessarily notice you, but her hound servants certainly will. They have incredibly sensitive senses. You also want to avoid making any actions that would cause undue noise, such as playing the audiograph machine that's in this room. Why, no, I don't have first-hand experience of this going poorly. Why do you ask? Basically, just loot what you can, stand if you need to, just don't move while doing so, and you'll be just fine. Pretty soon we'll have free run not just of this area, but the entirety of the mission. Another reason why I quite like its design. For now though, we have to be stealthy.
These odd lenses might be linked to what Ashworth is working on.
Indeed, those are the very same lenses that she mentioned in her conversation with Delilah.
If I can sabotage Ashworth's communion device, she'll be powerless.
Even now, Jindosh is still helping us, proving all the more just how cruel Emily truly is for treating him like she did. Also, if there's any area in the game that you explore and look around thoroughly, this is a good one to do it in. Not only is there a ton of pretty valuable loot, at least when it's all collected, there's also lots of cool details, all the magic script on the wall, the experiments that are in progress. The dissected corpses, not so much. But yeah, there's just a lot of cool details there that are worth viewing. So yeah, that device down there is the one that Brianna was talking about, and we really need to do something about that before she puts it to use.
I think I could ask Brianna to make an effigy of me.
You mean like this tangle of skin and bones representing one of the Dunderheads from the Oracular Order?
Yes, I'd keep it in my chambers.
You have bizarre taste, my dear Clarissa. I wouldn't want to see myself like that. I'd rather have my portrait painted by Delilah.
There's a quality to Brianna's style I prefer. Touched by something from deep down in the mud where there's no light. The endless womb and the cold, dead grave. Both the same.
But Brianna's effigies let her reach into the mind, into the heart. Wouldn't you be afraid she'd influence your dreams? Like she's going to do to the Sisters of the Abbey?
That's part of the thrill, sister.
And that's exactly why we want to get rid of this machine post-haste. Nothing good will come of it, at least not for us. And given the care that these witches have given the building, probably not for anyone else either. So just being careful taking down all of these women. This, by the way, is the spot I mentioned where that one witch from earlier would absolutely notice you if you didn't take her out in advance. You can do the needful quickly enough to avoid that, but it's better just to get rid of her ahead of time.
So this could be tampered with. Ashworth could be cut off from the void entirely. No more witchcraft. Now to activate it and sever Ashworth's connection to the void.
What will I do now? I'm ruined. That feeling. The things I could do. The touch of the void. Delilah. It was everything I had.
I would be sympathetic if not for the fact that these witches were kind of awful people. Also, one of the dick moves that the developers pull with this mission, especially if you're going for collectibles, is Brianna is carrying 2 of them. And no, they will not be found out by your heart. So typically the way this mission goes your first time, you go through with the heart, scouring everything after disabling Brianna and her witches. Because it's not just her, everyone is taken out. And you don't have to worry, even the ones that are on the more dangerous perches should survive. Should, of course, being the important operative word, but thankfully you can double check thanks to the stats menu. But yes, with all the witches and all the magic, even the doggos disabled, you basically have free reign of the place and you can go looting all the collectibles. Then you'll exit the mission, maybe miss a far reach and crash to the ground, and then find out at the score screen at the end that you actually missed 2 collectibles. And then you'll search through the entirety of the mission again and again, not finding them, until you look up online that Brianna is actually carrying 2 of them. Oh, and if you did something that got rid of her corpse, such as getting a stealth kill with the shadow kill ability, which is all the more likely if you're playing lethal as I often like to do, then you have no corpse to loot and those collectibles are gone forever. No, I'm not speaking from my own personal bitter experience, why do you ask? But yeah, gripes with some of the design decisions of this mission aside, the best way to do things here is to sneak in through your preferred method. I actually have a different one that I used in this recording that I will be bringing up. I'll be using it partially to exit the place. Make your way up to the lenses, filch them, activate the machine, which is easier than you'd think it would be since you don't actually have to knock Ashworth out in advance. Disable everything dangerous in the conservatory, and then go forth and loot it to your heart's content. Speaking of, that is the Roseboro prototype that the black market merchant wanted. So that's another side quest mostly complete. At this point I'm just going around looting everything. And much like Ashworth's own personal office, this place is filled to the brim with lootables. All sorts of minor valuables that you can find. Dark vision is definitely a great power to have here if you don't already know a lot of their locations in advance, at least with the upgraded one which shows items. And I do find this detail rather amusing. For as dangerous as they are, the witches are also quite childish at times. Also, Delilah.
As if you could ever hide your face from me, Emily. Little Black Sparrow, free from your cage at last.
It's done. Brianna Ashworth is no longer a witch.
You villain! You don't even know what you've done. A great bloom wilts and fades from the world.
Delilah, I will take apart everything you've built until I have what's mine.
Oh, Brianna. I don't believe we will speak again. The thought of seeing you reduced to such a pale, sad thing. It's too much to bear. I hate you for this, child.
I'm not only going to restore things to the way they were, I'm going to make them better.
And that conversation right there quashes pretty much any sympathy that I was garnering for Delilah. She cares about her minions until they're no longer at all useful to her. Then she just kind of discards them. Even Ashworth, who she was speaking with quite smittenly to earlier. And I think that is a bit of a misstep in the game's characterization of her. It has to walk a fine line between making her sympathetic and making her a proper villain that you can hate. And I feel that more often than not, it ends up trending towards making her hateable than making her sympathetic. Anyway, I mentioned earlier that I have my own preferred path through this mission that I typically take, but did not this time. And here I am showing it somewhat in reverse. Basically, the way the path works from the outside is that there is another open window on the second floor that you can make your way through. Here it is right here, and there's the one that leads to the outside. So you just go in, go across that ledge, go through the window into that other room. Jump and blink or far reach your way up. Make your way from that uppermost room with the rune to Brianna Ashworth's study, pick up the lens, disable everything, and then go through and loot it to your heart's content, as I am doing now. It's probably the most efficient way of tackling the mission, even if, admittedly, it's a little bit less exciting than stealthing past the witches. But then again, the witches aren't the most fun enemy to stealth past in the first place. Because, as I've kind of covered, if you don't handle them perfectly and you get spotted, actually dealing with them in a non-lethal, stealthy manner is all but impossible. They do a very good job of tracking you, doubly so if they have some of their hounds about. And the fact that they teleport all over the place makes them really difficult to hide from. Meaning that if you do get discovered, you kind of have no choice but to resort to lethal combat, or just running away completely until they lose attention. Or you could just reload. But either way, once you've gotten caught by them, there's not a whole lot you can do, at least not in my experience, if you're trying to keep with the whole stealth, non-lethal approach. And that's why I elected to just take them all out at once. Anyway, at this point we've picked up pretty much every important valuable. I was scanning with the hat there to make sure I didn't miss any outsider artifacts, and thankfully I didn't. I definitely missed plenty of treasures, I know that for a fact, as we'll see with my coin completion count at the end. There were just so many valuables hidden in all of these missions that picking up all of them is an ordeal I am not willing to undergo. First-person platforming, people. I'm surprised it took this long to have a death by gravity like that. It really is an issue, even though I've been making it seem like it's not. Actually, platforming accurately, given the first-person perspective, can actually be somewhat tricky. Especially if you're trying to move from one tiny platform to another. So let's take a different route. I should have done this in the first place anyway. Show off a bit of the level that I otherwise wouldn't have. This bit by the guard station. When they're active, they're really annoying to latch onto because of the constant movement. If you end up mistiming your far reach or blink, you may end up failing to catch it at all, and just plummet to your death. And once again, no, I am not speaking from experience. That's purely a hypothetical. So yeah, let's just get rid of that so we have an easier place to warp from. As I try and make my way over stealthily. Don't exactly feel like dealing with the guards on the streets. Also importantly, this lets me pick up that painting that I forgot. Once again, whoops. Now with that loose end out of the way, let's make our way out of the mission. Making sure to stop by the black market on the way, of course. We have that prototype to deliver. And since we checked out that apartment, we can actually get a better deal than if we had not. Note though that our journey back isn't going to be a brief one. This is what happens when you don't exactly plan out the specific route that you want to take through one of these missions. There's just so many options that, with me at least, there ends up being a fair bit of choice paralysis. On the plus side, I do show off this little apartment here that you can choose to go through. It's a useful vantage point for making your way through the mission. But, considering that we didn't use it on the way there, much like a lot of other things, it is optional. Play your way. It's kind of the thing with this series after all. There's nothing especially valuable here, just a few minor items if you are going for that 100% coin completion. Otherwise, not the most useful building, so let's leave it alone. We've spent more than enough time in this mission by now. And here we are, back at the start. A nice little circle all around. And with the guards taken out, we have much more free reign of the place than we had before. So let's just speed on over to the black market.
What? Welcome back. I see you found the prototype.
Your acquaintance didn't make it.
It is a risky line of work, I'm afraid, but let's not dwell. I expect you'll be interested in payment. First your finder's fee, of course, and if you like, I can draw up some schematics based on the prototype, something you can use to modify your tools. And as a token of my appreciation, a discount at the shop.
A fair deal.
So yeah, you get a lot of good shit for doing this side quest. A bit of loot, more so if you investigated the apartment beforehand, a discount at the shop, and some very useful blueprints. I mean, we've had some good ones before, but these yellow ones?
The masterwork's all, you can't go wrong.
Thank you, Caxton, I couldn't have put it better myself. But yeah, silliness aside, these yellow masterwork upgrades are far and away better than your bog standard ones, always providing some sort of really special bonus, at the cost of not only being quite expensive, but also requiring a certain amount of prerequisite upgrades. In the case of our crossbow here, we picked up Long Distance Lover, which in addition to being the name of my band, is an upgrade that gives us perfect accuracy when we're looking through our spyglass. previously we've had pretty good accuracy, but especially when firing at really long distance targets, there is a bit of inaccuracy with the reticle. The other upgrade is not super useful for us. It gives any bolts we fire a piercing property, but only bolts. Not the sleep dots that we so love to use, at least I'm pretty sure that's not the case. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about that. But yeah, since we're trying to be non-lethal, having piercing bolts wouldn't do us all that much good. Speaking of good, it's time to do a dirty deed for the greater good.
What?
Our greater good at least. And that means robbing the black market for all it's worth. Honestly, while I might have felt at least a tiny twinge of guilt about the previous robberies, this one not so much. This shopkeep is kind of an asshole. In fact, if you view him with the heart, I think it always says something at least somewhat negative about him. He's kind of a ponce. So as for how we did this, you need to take the wheel from the shop, use it to open up that gate outside and go through here, and as long as you shot that little covering through that window gap that we did, you can make your way up the chain here. At least, theoretically. I'm having a lot of trouble with it for reasons I didn't quite understand at the time.
I look forward to the day when I can reopen my gallery.
Eventually, though, I figure it out. And you know what? Unlike previous missions, we've actually managed to maintain Ghost up until this point, so let's not break that streak. I will, however, show off my legendary inaccuracy. Broadside Bar and Lotus, they call me. 'Cause, I can't hit one. Although in perfect fairness to me, that one was a little bit bullshit. My aim was perfectly fine, it's just that I was a little bit too close to the shelf that I was crouching under, and thus it blocked my shot. It's actually a general issue when aiming at non-hostile targets. With hostile targets, the reticle will change red when you target them, ensuring that you have a clear shot. With non-hostile targets, it will always remain white, and thus you can have situations like the one there where it looks like you have a clear shot, but actually it's going to end up being blocked by a bit of the geometry. Anyway, that's another black market robbed. Another nice shiny gold feather in our caps, so that's basically it for this mission. We've done everything of note there is to do, so let's leave with Megan.
So it's done.
Ashworth won't be a problem anymore.
Good. But Emily, there's something else. Back when I lived in Dunwall, I did things that I'm not proud of.
Isn't that a requirement for citizenship?
What I've got to say is not a joke. I knew Delilah and Ashworth. Bought into their bullshit. Which led me down a bad road. To be honest, before all this, I thought Delilah dead. I don't want to get into it right now. But I felt like you should know. There are things I regret.
All right, Megan. Thank you for opening up. If only a little.
I'm starting to feel like you deserve it. Are you ready to leave now?
Yes. Let's go. Take me back to the Dreadful Whale.
Another step toward the Duke of Serkonos. And Delilah.
Oh yeah, we got Ghost. Not merciful though, even though I'm not entirely sure which target actually died. It must have been one of the gods, it definitely wasn't one of the witches. But we picked up everything major and did all of these special actions, so I'm happy.